So think Twitter and history, put them together, and that's where we came up with Twistery. Basically, this is a project to make history fun again. That's kind of that was the goal. The people involved in this project mainly were just history buffs. There's no one really that's got a degree in history. We basically saw that there was an opportunity here. So let me back up just a little bit. Basically, attending some conferences, I started to see things showing up in what people were calling a Twitter channel. For me, up until that point, Twitter seemed like the dumbest idea in the world. Thank you. And I say that in all honesty because if you think Twitter is the dumbest idea in the world still, then there's still hope for you. Because there are all kinds of unintended uses for Twitter, which I'm going to show you one of them right now. So basically, Marion Jensen is the person who came up with the original idea. So he calls me up on a Sunday and he just says, I've got this really fantastic idea. We had both been attending a conference virtually and just kind of following it in the Twitter channel. And you could actually tell when the conference was out of session because all the tweets would go away. You just kind of have this lull, this dip in the chatter. And so basically, that's where the big idea came from. So I'm going to skip this because of time, but basically, we chose Twitter simply because it's a huge audience and we like attention. So basically, the answer to this little cartoon is yes. It's perfectly okay. It's actually kind of fun. So the concept really is pretty simple. We talked about kind of where this idea came from. We felt like we were at these conferences. Some of them where we were either in another session, but like attending 3 sessions at the same time. I remember one of them, Marion asked a question in a session that he wasn't attending, and he got an answer for it. So you can actually be participating actively and do it without necessarily being physically present. And so from there, the idea that you could actually learn and reenact history, but not on a battlefield with a uniform, but rather just on Twitter. So kind of my 3 objectives that fell out of this, and I have to say, basically it was just for fun at the beginning, and I think that's how a lot of cool things start. But at the beginning, we just wanted to see how it would work. So we were actually at our computers setting up accounts for dead people and tweeting, because it said in their journal that they had beans for breakfast. We would be there at the computer in the morning, and we would tweet something that would represent what was in the journal at that point. So we were using, primary sources, a lot of times journals. Marion Jensen and Rob Barton started this off doing a reenactment of the 3 months leading up to the Battle of Gettysburg, and then the battle itself. So you have the objectives here, and to be fair, these kind of distilled over time. But basically, the idea that you get the multiple perspectives, so you dispense with, or you go deeper than the 30,000-foot level, the generic narrative that gives Gettysburg like a paragraph, okay? And you also have a sense for when things actually happen, because that's another component of what we were trying to do is match the time. So if it was April 1st, 1862, then it would be April 1st, 2010 that we would tweet it. And we try and even match the time of day. So you kind of have history unfolding on a delay, so that you get that feeling of, this didn't just all happen in a paragraph that some historian wrote a narrative for. It happened over time. People didn't know what was going to happen. For example, at the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was very intense. And so you get that feeling, you get that sense of, I don't know what's going to happen. And then the last thing I think is most important that has started to come out is just that historical narratives really are very subjective, and I think that that's something that hopefully we want students to come away with, and ourselves too. But as I think about using this in the classroom, history, the way it's told, the way it is retold, is extremely subjective. So how this happened was, like I said, Gettysburg first. That reenactment went off. It was exhausting for Marion and for Rob both, because we hadn't really come up with the idea that we could schedule the tweets yet. So we were like literally, we went to the library, checked out a dozen books, and we're sitting there at the computer at the Center for Open and Sustainable Learning. We were supposed to probably be doing other things, but anyway, so we had all our history books out, and we were like tweeting when these things were supposed to happen. We figured out later that you can actually, there are tools to let you schedule these things so you can go to bed or not have to wake up super, super early. So anyway, but it does detach you a little bit, because if you have to wake up and go on a march in the morning and have beans for breakfast, then, that you get to live that too. Except minus the beans. So anyway, we went ahead and wised up a little bit at the end of the reenactment, and we started scheduling stuff. Meanwhile, a history teacher in Missouri serendipitously found this reenactment of Gettysburg and emailed us and asked us how we were doing it. So we gave her kind of a little blog recipe of this is how we did it. She applied that. She took it, ran with it, and with her class reenacted the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was fantastic because it was like someone else actually made sense out of what we were doing, which is the best way for those things to happen. So then at the end of that, we decided to take it a step further, and we did a larger reenactment. I'll tell you about it in just a sec. But my favorite part, and this little graphic is to remind me, and this is, high school students will personalize and they'll internalize and they'll see it their way. But at one point, I was following the Cuban Missile Crisis reenactment that Carla was doing with her class, and Khrushchev does a nuclear missile test, and he tells JFK, "Booyah," and like in your face, and it's so 16-year-old that it was perfect. Now I know that's we're not trying to generate accurate historical reenactment. We're not trying to replace the experience of the primary sources, but it shows that the kids were picking it up, so it was kind of neat. So another cartoon. All right, so real quick, the process. So we, obviously in Carla's class, she didn't need to do the Google group, but we had a Google group for our bigger reenactment. We decided to take the 1847 Pioneer Trek, so the Mormon Pioneer Trek that came across the plains in 1847, and they were all told by Brigham Young to keep journals. Of course, he didn't keep one himself, which I find kind of interesting, but he made them all keep journals. And so we have these fantastic journals that have all been put online that are freely available. And we just we each grabbed a journal and grabbed a character or two, linked up with a bunch of author friends of Marion's. And so by the time we were done, we had 15 characters, 12 authors or content creators, I suppose, and we just kind of went for it. And we were self-organizing. We'd never really seen each other, except Marion knew most of them. But we didn't all know each other, but we just got together and we decided to throw up a Google spreadsheet and start creating tweets based on these 12 or 15 journals, excuse me. So we did that, and then the rest of the process is we combined them all together. We kind of had to sync up because it wasn't always clear when things happened, so we wanted to make sure that, when the horse ran through camp and freaked everyone out, that it doesn't get tweeted like, an hour apart from different characters. So you have to sync things up and make sure the sequence works. But then we scheduled it using a system that we had found by then, and it all just worked. So that was a bigger reenactment. So one last cartoon. Okay, so just in the time that's left, the reenactments that we ended up doing were Gettysburg, that 1847 Pioneer Trek, the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was Carla's project. Someone else tweeted the Exodus, which I thought was fun. Took some liberties there too, and okay. And then we did at a conference, TTIX, we did a concept piece where we did a 2-hour session where we basically, in that workshop, we generated the last 6 hours of the Titanic sinking, which I really want to come back to and do that one properly. Future reenactment ideas, we're talking about Lewis and Clark, the Apollo missions, some of the later ones with the lunar rover, my favorite. Titanic 100th anniversary is coming just up around the corner in 2012, so that would be really neat as well. Now I just want to talk to you briefly about what we're really excited about, so we were given the opportunity through the Talus Foundation. We were given the opportunity to bring all these tools together on our site and actually develop a unified system that had all of our tools in one place. Up to this point, we've just been cobbling it together, which I think is still great. But this actually just kind of brought all the pieces together and included features like single button follow. So now you've got an entire series of characters that you can follow from a master character that just retweets all 12 or 15 or however many you have. So it makes it easier to share the reenactment, to follow or unfollow as you see fit. Character management and all that stuff, all the timing, pre-scheduling of the tweets is all built into the system. And now you can even upload a spreadsheet and in a CSV format, and it'll just bring all the tweets in, which is pretty neat. So I encourage you to check out beta.twistery.org. And there's a quick screenshot. I'll forego the full demo because I've seen how the internet works around here. And we're just going to basically point out here that you've got, you can see there's actually a broadcast schedule on a calendar as things start getting scheduled. This is the first time we've publicly announced this, so I don't expect that there are any reenactments currently scheduled. You can browse existing reenactments, and then you can create your own. One of the things that I'm interested to hear some feedback is we're hoping that to get some ideas on how to reuse other people's reenactments. So you can basically piggyback on someone else's. And there's things that we're working through to make that happen. But basically, we've met all of our deliverables for the first, for what we told Talus we would do, and we're excited about it. So I have 5 minutes?
5 minutes until you have 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. So maybe I will actually show you a couple of things that I pulled up ahead of time. But future directions, one of the things that we think would be interesting for the classroom setting. Now, recognize that all of what we did was really kind of from a history buff, hobbyist perspective. And then when Carla did her thing with Cuban Missile Crisis, we thought, well, gee, this actually could be kind of neat. And so as we started looking more at the case of using this in the classroom, we realized that people are going to be on different schedules. So we're looking at some future things, including being able to take a reenactment that already happened, rerun it, set a start and end date, and just say, you figure it out. So if you want the Cuban Missile Crisis in 2 weeks, then you can play the whole thing out in real time. Or if you say, I've only got 2 days, then the tweets just start firing, and you get it a lot faster. Another idea that I think we want to implement is using geolocation. I mean, Twitter already has it in the API. We just need to start using it, and then that way you'd be able to visualize, for example, the Pioneer Trek. As they're going across the plains, you could actually see the tweet locations showing up on a Google map or something similar. And then finally, a real easy way to kickstart some translations. I haven't really mentioned it, but one of the things that's fantastic about doing this kind of thing, and what happened to us was we started getting picked up by, people started to notice us in all different places. So there's a professor in Switzerland who really wanted to collaborate. He's now got 25% of his time just to work on twistery, which I think is awesome because I don't have any % of my time paid to work on twistery, but I'm glad somebody does. So that was neat, and then we also had some exposure. Actually, there's a really cool account called the UK War Cabinet. So if you go to twitter.com/UK War Cabinet, basically the National Archives of the United Kingdom have used their primary source documents to basically put together a nice reenactment, a year-long reenactment of the World War II, and it was neat. I got to speak with the person who did that, and he basically offered it. We're talking about basically putting it on twistery so that people can reuse it, actually continue it, because it was more than 1 year, obviously, but the poor guy's exhausted, so he's ready to turn it over to the crowd. And so all of those things are really, really neat developments that have come from this, and just kind of the serendipitous exposure that you get when you're willing to just kind of turn it loose. Recognize that Twitter is not, technically open in the strict sense, but we're also we're just looking for the biggest audience and looking for the best way to share. So that made sense to us. So I just wanted to throw this up because we've talked about kind of the mechanics of all of this, but really what we learned while doing these reenactments is the gold nugget out of all of this. So just a couple of the highlights, and these are actually Rob Barton's. He threw this on his blog, but so there. I'll skip ahead to number 6. Don't tie up the president's horse within rope's distance of a sinkhole. That actually happened. Number 8, 3 of the 4 smokestacks were real on the Titanic. The last one actually was just decoration. So, fun fact of the day. And then number 9. So the best time to raid an enemy's camp is just when they're sitting down to dinner. And the rebel yell, I learned what that was all about because at the Gettysburg reenactment, so basically the Confederates come in yelling and screaming and waving their guns. The Yankees just clear out, and basically they had just finished preparing dinner. And so not only did they basically scare them out of camp, but they also sat down to a nice dinner just after a 2 days march. So it was perfect. So, and the final thing is history can be fun and interesting, and you can see the different perspectives when you actually take it to the person level, the actual stories. So with that, I will just encourage you to go check it out, and any history buffs out there, jump on in. We'd love to have you. Thanks.
We have a few minutes for questions before answering it. Scott, please.
Yeah, so the way it seems is that you've got Twitter as kind of a broadcast mechanism, but are you actually getting responses from the followers back to the characters? And are the characters themselves then responding back to people following them? Are you actually using it as a conversational medium?
That I think it's totally doable, and I think that would be a blast. We actually didn't do that in any of our reenactments to this point, but it's totally doable. We did get retweets a lot, which is fun because you start to see where people are really getting excited about your reenactment, and lots of quirky things happen when you actually get that granular. It's like it's real, it's not just the narrative. And one of the cool things about this is that the students, if they're doing the reenactment, they get to make those choices. And that's valuable because then they see, oh, this is what happened to my textbook. They had to make those choices. They took out all the fun stuff, and all that's left is this quick little paragraph on Gettysburg. So, but yeah, that would be fun to do.
Following you?
Yeah, so the question was, did we do any aggregating of data, looking at people following us or the stream? We haven't yet. There's a great website, 180kit.com, that lets you do some fun stuff with that. And 140kit, excuse me. Yeah, 140kit.com. I just gave myself extra characters there. And that would be a great way to do it. But most of our reenactments were still being followed by less than 1,000 people, I would say. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we had more followers than that. But based on the retweets, that's what I would guess. So we're hoping that it gets a little bigger once we get the UK National Archives involved and a few others.
Time for another question or two?
I know nothing about history and reenactments and the value of them. I was just wondering whether...
It's okay, neither do I.
It looks like a lot of fun, and clearly there's something to be learned from it. I'm just wondering whether your work is, or you intend it to be informed by research into the value of reenactments themselves, and the pros and cons of using reenactments to teach history.
Right, actually, so we didn't have time, or I didn't take the time to go into the research details, but a lot of this is based on Sam Weinberg's work with historical thinking and historical reenactments. I don't know if he would say reenactments, but certainly historical narratives. And I think that we could have a separate conversation about it, but it is fairly well grounded in the research, and historical thinking is definitely kind of a hot topic right now. Getting kids to get beyond just the fact memorization and actually start thinking somewhat like historians from the perspective of you need to triangulate your information, that kind of stuff. Don't just believe the first thing you see, because a lot of the sources we were going through actually had some little conflicts, and so we had to kind of figure out, we had to make decisions about who to believe.